voluntarily activate certain neurons, di ba? So you have like voluntary motor control, but there are also non-voluntary motor regulations, di ba? So yung voluntary motor control, ito yung direct voluntary pathway. Iba ito sa direct, yung dopaminergic na pathway na direct or indirect pathway. Although it has some similarities, pero iba yung pathway na dinadaanan niya, di ba? Pag voluntary motor pathway, so this is for finer control of motor movements. Usually this would involve for cranial nerves yung corticobulbar fibers, and for the spinal cord would be the corticospinal fibers and the fibers from the lateral corticospinal tract. How about the indirect voluntary pathway? Pag indirect kasi, usually it involves or it invokes an older system, and it's the one that controls the proximal joint movements and axial musculature. Kasi the one in the center, the one for positioning, that you do not consciously, you're not consciously controlling. So this could be the indirect voluntary pathway. So this one would be involving the reticular formation of the brainstem. Now, yung non-voluntary adjustments, it would involve, again, the older system, adjustment of the body for visual input, for any gravitational changes, etc. Okay? So here, meron din siya yung control of muscle tone and the deep tendon reflexes. So these ones would involve the stretch reflex that we studied before. Okay? So ito na. What are the important, you touched on the corticospinal tract, diba? And the corticobulbar tract. Okay? Basta for the brainstem, there would always be brainstem nuclei. Diba? Natatandaan niyo ba yung mga brainstem nuclei ninyo for the cranial nerves? Cranial nerve nuclei in the brainstem. Diba? That will be where your corticobulbar tract, galing siya sa cortex, mag-i-end up siya in the nuclei, different nuclei in the brainstem, before that nucleus will send out fibers for the that will represent the cranial nerves. Yung corresponding part naman niya in the spinal cord, corticospinal tract, the fibers here will end up in the motor nerve anterior horn cell, diba? And from the anterior horn cell, it will send out the axons, okay, to become spinal nerves. Kuha niyo na yan, diba? Okay. Oh, wala nagsasalita. Gising pa mo. So, when we talk about, yes, very good, descending pathways, we have upper motor neuron. Ito very important sa neurology ito, yung upper motor neuron from the primary motor cortices, okay, going down. Okay, they would pass to the brainstem going down until prior to its attachment or connection to the anterior horn cell. From the anterior horn cell, yun na yung part ng may lower motor neuron going down to the muscle for contraction to take place. Okay? So there are different manifestations of upper and lower motor neurons. Ito naman yung illustration of corticobulbar fibers. Now, all of these, di ba, will be originally coming from the pyramidal tract. Okay? But when they end up in the brainstem, they will cross to the other side and innervate and end up in the different nuclei. Okay? So this would be your corticobulbar fibers. Okay, tara, natin. Let's highlight. Ayan. Para pala highlight flashlight. Hindi na-realize na iliwanag pala siya pag ginaganyan mo siya. Okay, so kagaya ito, these would just be illustrating the different fibers. Okay, kagaya ito, nandun yung red nuclei. Okay, tapos yung different fibers of the pyramidal tract. This one would be the fibers, di ba? Ito yun. Okay, going down. Okay, and somehow when they end up at the level of the pond, they will be incorporated and they will split up to accommodate the different Ponti nuclei. Pinakita na sa inyo yan? Yes! Okay, very good. Ayan o. Tapos, yung iba pang mga nuclei, mga glossopharyngeal nerves, vagus nerve, and the nuclei where they came from, ayan na siya yung illustration niya. And then this would be the deposition of the pyramids. Okay? Sige. Again, what's important about the descending pathways, diba? Aside from the pyramidal system or the corticospinal tract, another pathway would be the rubrospinal tract. So this would be working in coordination with the reticulospinal tract as well. So mamaya papakita natin where these are located. The rubrospinal tract, they are important both for voluntary and non-voluntary motor activity. The reticulospinal tract, aside from both the voluntary and non-voluntary indirect activity, it's also important, ito importante na tandaan, in the control of muscle tone and reflex responsiveness. Diba? Because these two tracts are the ones that are functioning when we try to stimulate a patient who is comatose. But yung Glasgow Coma Scale kasi, if you're familiar with that, there is a positioning there, kunyari, motor stimulation is the patient in a decorticate stimulation, decorticate position or decerebrate position. Okay. Sino familiar? Di ba nasabi na natin yung CCS? GCS, Glasgow Coma Scale, di ba? Pag decorticate, paano yung position? Doon sa familiar, sino pag decorticate positioning, ano yung position niya? Nakaganon. Yes. Familiar siya? Decorticate na kaganon, but decerebrate na kaganon, di ba? Before we did to, bakit ba ang importance niya? Bakit decerebrate mas okay kesa decorticate mas okay kesa decerebrate? Okay? Both of these will involve either the rubrospinal tract or the reticulospinal tract. Diba? So, coming from the red nucleus, the influences siya coming from the cortex, pero the rubrospinal tract would actually start from the red nucleus over here and then go down. The reticulospinal tract would originate from the pons, the pontine tsaka medullary reticulospinal tracts kasi. But they have influences coming from the cortex. Okay? Yeah, medullary naman yan. Sa may area ng medulla. Okay? Then there's also vestibulospinal tracts, as the name implies, yung lateral vestibular nucleus of the pons, di ba? Diniscuss na sa inyo? Di ba? Hindi? Okay. Sige. This is for the vestibular reflexes and responses to gravity. Okay? Basically, pag naisip nyo vestibulospinal tract, this would be under the control of the cerebellum. How about the medial longitudinal fasciculus? It would involve the brainstem and the upper spinal cord, and it coordinates the neck reflexes and the eye reflexes. Okay? It has both ascending and descending fibers. So this one would, di ba pag yung mga adults eyes reflexes or yung tonic neck reflexes, meron mga ganon. So it's the one, this is the one involved. So vestibulospinal tract from the pons, and then and the medial longitudinal fasciculus for eye control. Ayan. Ito basahin natin ha. Importante kasi ito. Can you imagine yourself if your eyes, did you notice that your eyes, that your eyes are coordinated in movement, di ba? So, there's if for any particular reason, one of your eye muscles will not function or will be weak, what will happen? Ano nangyayari? Ang nakikita nyo, doble, duling, di ba? Kasi technically speaking, the area dun sa may dun sa retinal portion, di ba? Meron yung area yun, where you detect yung for vision, for sharp vision, ganyan. It has to be, both eyes should be coordinated in their movements so that you see an object not as two different objects. Kasi dalawa yung mata mo, di ba? So dapat yoked sila, ibig sabihin coordinated sila in their movements. And this is made possible by by the medial longitudinal fasciculus when they have the parapontine reticular formation. Okay? So you will actually, na-discuss na ba to? Yes, partly. Correct? Yes. So you know. Okay, so when this one comes, there's a signal that would come here and then basta pag gusto mong tumingin doon sa left side, automatically the eyes, the left lateral rectus will contract and the medial rectus will contract simultaneously because of this pathway. Okay? So kung pinadrawing namin sa inyo ito, kaya nyo. Yay! Kasi pag may lesion ito, dito, somehow, magkakaroon ng disconjugate, Kasi this one, diba, to the opposite side, PPRF, and from the PPRF, it will stimulate ipsilaterally this one, the lateral rectus, and contralaterally the medial rectus, passing through the MLF. Okay? Tandaan niyo. Okay, yoke, eye movement. Okay? Okay. Now, going back to the red nucleus here, aside from being involved in reflex movements during that we elicit in comatose patients, the red nucleus is actually an alternative pathway for the transmission of signals from the cortex going to the spinal cord. Kaya, even if the pyramidal tract is impaired, it's through when there are still attempts to cause movements, the signals will pass through the red nucleus, and then eventually it will end up in the spinal cord. But yung fine motor movements, okay, will not be possible. Okay? Or there will be a problem with the finer motor movement. So here again, so hindi siya totally paralyzed, basta hindi affected or hindi involved sa lesion ng red nucleus. Okay? So, this one will just show us that along the motor cortex, meron kasi mga different columns, diba? We showed the level or the layers of the cortex in itself, and then there are columns of cells that function as a unit. Okay. Now, I would also like to emphasize the presence of two pyramidal cell neurons, in groups of pyramidal cell neurons. You have dynamic neurons and static neurons. Okay? So this one, usually the static neurons are the ones that maintain certain postures. Okay? Yung dynamic neurons are the ones that initiate mga rapid movements. Okay? And this would belong to two different types of pyramidal cell neurons. So, okay, your dynamic neurons are mostly located in the red nucleus. Yung static neurons would be in the primary motor cortex. So again, for the motor system to function exceptionally well, they need feedback signals coming from the somatosensory system. And what's important again to remember would be the presence of the muscle spindles. Okay? as well as the Golgi tendon organs, and then all the other, and the tactile receptors that initially receive the signals. Okay. Now, this illustration in Guyton will show you that, kita nyo, diba, this is the anterior motor neuron. What we know is the other name for the anterior motor neuron, taking into consideration all of these pathways converging on it, no? Parang pinagkaisahan siya, lahat siya, parang sinistimulate siya dito. And your core anterior motor neuron will have to listen to all the influences coming from these pathways, diba? So what have you heard about another name for the anterior horn cell or the primary, the motor neuron here, anterior motor neuron? Alpha. It's actually it's the final common pathway. Ito na yung final pathway na. So remember, if we talk about the final common pathway, this would be your core anterior motor neuron that will have to negotiate all the other impulses that will be coming from, like here, the vestibulospinal, reticulospinal tract, the rubrospinal tract, reticulospinal tract here. Okay? Magko-converge yan lahat dito. Kaya ito, convergence of the different motor control pathways on the anterior motor neurons. And the end result, once that your motor neuron, anterior horn cell, has made sense of all these signals here, you need final output, motor output. So if this says na kaya may mga cerebellar, vestibulospinal and the reticulospinal here, or the tectospinal, reticulospinal, basically all this, pag sinabi nila na this influence, kailangan medyo ayusin mo yung motor signal, ganun yung gagawin niya for fine-tuning, fine adjustments. So, because of the role of the rubrospinal tract, even if you remove the primary motor cortex, there would be only be loss of the voluntary control of your discrete movements, okay? Especially of the hands and fingers, mga fine movements, but yung fixation movements can still occur, okay? And basically, yung reticulospinal tract, the rubrospinal tract will be the one functioning in this case. Muscle spasticity, when they use, sa mga PT dyan, muscle spasticity usually is seen when the upper motor neuron pathway is involved. Okay? Ibig sabihin, pag may lesion dun sa upper motor neuron pathway, primarily, if there is any damage to the motor cortex, okay? And this is because the motor cortex exerts a tonic stimulatory effect on the motor neurons of the spinal cord. So meron siyang, di ba kanina nakita natin yung anterior horn cell, meron siyang continuous tonic stimulation from the higher pathways. Pag magka-lesion doon, mawawala yung tonic stimulation na yun. Initially, there would be loss of the muscle tone, kaya tinatawag siyang hypotonia because there would be removal of the stimulating effect. But eventually, there would be other pathways either that would take over or further damage of the other parts of the motor cortex can lead to spasms or unnecessarily muscle contraction. Okay? Example, this is testing for a, this is what we term as clonus, and this is because of a lesion in the upper motor neuron. Kasi yung inhibition niya regarding muscle contraction. Kasi if you do it in a normal person, hindi natin gagawin ngayon para hindi tayo mag-ibad ng sapatos. When you initially do the, when you flex when you flex this area, di ba, para the ankle, dapat hindi siya gagalaw ng ganyan. But because yung inhibition is lost, magpa-flex siya gano'n, tapos akit na naman siya. Okay. So there is parang, this is not tremor, this is actually because of a, this is what we call clonus. When you see this, illicit this in patients, this is because of a lesion in the upper motor neuron of that particular patient. Okay? Most likely because of strokes or any spinal cord problem, for instance. Kasi kung titingnan yung pareho right and left involved So, baka meron siyang problem with the spinal cord. Okay? Again, in coordination with this, there is the this is how you elicit the Babinski, di ba? Parang tumataas, upward turning toe. This is, pag nag-elicit ka, ayun. Kaya yung happy feet nyo kanina, actually, is not so happy being stimulated. Masakit yan So, this is the Babinski sign. Normally, yung mga kids, ba yung mga young kids, or yung mga toddlers, mga babies, when you stimulate the foot, meron din silang Babinski sign. Normal yun. Even kayo, kung maliliit kayo, normally, pag mga babies, meron silang Babinski sign. We usually elicit this if there is a problem with upper motor neuron, di ba yung cortical area. But as you develop, when you become toddlers, young kids, nawawala yung Babinski sign. The Babinski sign is present because initially upper motor neuron control of the lower motor neurons is not yet optimal. Maturation has not fully occurred, kaya sa babies may ganyan. But you can just imagine when you're starting to walk at mayroon ka pang ganyan sign, di ba? When you're walking, the tendency, yung toes nyo, tendency nyo would be to flex the toes, di ba? Kung naglalakad kayo, may Babinski pa rin kayo, magkakaroon kayo imbalance. More than that, there would be a problem with walking or motor control because of the upper motor neuron lesion. Okay? Now, in patients such as this, obviously naman, nakapaglakad na siya before nagkaroon na ng problem somewhere, maybe spinal cord o the brain man, yung inhibition for this reflex has been lost. Kaya bumabalik siya. Okay? Brainstem, na-discuss nyo na yung brainstem, di ba? Di ba? Di ba? Mga cranial nerves lang. Discuss nyo yung brainstem. When? Yes, no? Wala pa?
Parang kapag nagagana siya, mag-hyperextend.
Okay, so in the area of the brainstem actually is the connection between the cortex and the spinal cord, diba? And it also has special functions like control of respiration,
Yun na yun.
equilibrium,
Discuss ng brainstem for
the partial control of GI function. Kasi meron dyan area where when you stimulate, nagkakaroon ng stimulation of the gastrointestinal tract, di ba? So this is the brainstem that has been made out to be more appealing because it is multicolored. So you have the how does the brainstem function in the control of motor function? Okay? So there are one part of the brainstem or one area there would be the reticular nuclei that are found at the level of the pons. On both sides yan. So usually, this nuclei in the pons will be very excitable. And the stimuli that would excite them would be signals from the vestibular nuclei. And also from the cerebellum. Okay? So, another portion here would be vestibular nuclei. Okay? This is located here. They also have strong signals to anti-gravity muscle. So if we see here, tandaan nyo dito, pontireticular nuclei, the vestibular nuclei here as a group and the medullary reticular nuclei. All of these actually are reticular nuclei, pero iba-iba siyang level. Diba? Pontine, medullary, tapos meron dito vestibular. Remember that for the pontine nuclei and the vestibular nuclei, if you stimulate these nuclei, it will excite anti-gravity muscles. Ito dala, pontine reticular nuclei, vestibular nuclei. Pagdating sa medullary reticular nuclei, when you stimulate these, then it functions, it relaxes your anti-gravity muscles. Ano ba yung mga anti-gravity muscles nyo? That would be the muscles, yung nandito sa center, paraspinal muscles, anything that will support the body against gravity. Makes you stand. Okay? This one would be important for that particular function. Okay? So here, this is how it is. Yung medullary reticulospinal tract, this is the spinal cord. Okay? And then the lateral vestibulospinal and the pontine reticulospinal tract would have an effect on the anterior horn cells here. Will depend on what you'd like to do. Okay? Either to excite the muscles for anti-gravity or to relax them. So if you decide, kagaya kanina, meron mabas, diba? Nakaupo siya kanina, pero yung actu wants to excite the anti-gravity muscle. So what would act there? The signal would also be coming from your medullary and your vestibulospinal tract, exciting the anterior horn cell for anti-gravity muscles to act. Tayo ka na, diba? So, iba na yung forgave. But if pagdating mo, upo ka na, yung anti-gravity muscles mo would be partly disinhibited or partly inhibited pala. This could be through the medullary reticulospinal tract. Okay? So, ito na. So this is going back to the position. This is decortication. There's flexion of the upper extremities muscle, extension of the lower extremity, and there is plantar flexion. Ganun. So parang naka-think kayo ganyan, tapos naka-ganyan. Decorticate yan. And pag decorticate positioning, because the rubrospinal tract is the one for contraction of the muscles of the upper extremity. Okay? Pag decortication, intact pa rin siya. Tapos, at this particular level, kasi this illustration, this is the red nucleus. The red nucleus, when I stimulate it, will have an effect on the muscles of the upper extremities to flex it, and then extend both lower extremities. Okay? So, if I have a patient who's comatose, ibig sabihin, cortical functions are not intact anymore. Okay? They will have a response na pag intact ang red nucleus, connected pa rin siya dun sa muscle sa baba, di ba? I mean, when you stimulate the foot, for instance, tapos magko-contract yung muscles, the muscles of the lower extremities are still intact. When you stimulate that, and then intact pa rin yung red nucleus, mga position niya would be naka-flex at saka naka-extend. Naka-flex yung upper extremities, naka-extend yung lower extremities. Okay? So this is lesion here. Decorticate, meaning the influence of the cortex is removed from the lower centers. Okay, but the red nucleus is still intact. Kaya ganun yung response niya. So here, the rubrospinal tract will influence primarily the flexor muscles of the upper extremities in humans. And this is actually an ominous sign because it means that pag may lesion ka that you remove cortical influences, pwede siyang bumaba to involve the lower centers in the brainstem, and what do you find there? Control for cardiovascular function and respiration. Okay, so we actually watch out for any deterioration. So, kunyari, mayroon kang patient na ganito, mayroon kang malaking hemorrhage sa this part, okay? And talaking hemorrhage. Area na ito ng thalamus eh. Tapos malapit na siya sa may midbrain. Okay? But the red nucleus has not yet been affected or transected. So but when in a comatose patient, if I stimulate any painful stimulation of any part of the body, diba? Pag ito hindi na functioning, yung cortex, wala na siyang response to name calling. Usually pag Glasgow coma state, tatawagin mo muna. O kaya name calling, or makikita mo may spontaneous eye opening. Diba? Pag hindi na siya nagre-respond, walang eye opening, hindi siya nagpa-follow ng commands. Pag sinabi mo, press my fingers with your right hand, or anything, just to follow a command, if they're not responding anymore, you test for motor function. And if they have, and they appear to be like this, ganyan na yung ano niya, pag nag-press ka dito, i-apply pain here, and ito yung naging response niya, iisipin mo, oh my God, malapit na siya sa lower brainstem, nandun na siya sa above the red nucleus. Intact pa yung red nucleus ko kasi gumaganon pa yung kamay. But the cortex, from the diencephalon, thalamus upwards, wala na siyang effect on the lower center. So this is basically a reflex reaction. Okay? Ngayon, how about here, the cerebrate? This is hyperextension of all, diba? Upper extremities and the lower extremities. So here, you remove the influence of the cortex. At the same time, you remove the influence of the red nucleus for flexion. So lahat ng anti-gravity muscles mo will be stimulated, pati yung dito sa upper extremities. Okay. What's intact would be the pontine and medullary reticular systems. Okay. So this one will be in extension. Okay. Ito na lang. So this one will be along this area. Okay. So this one, the pontine and medullary reticular formation will be the ones intact. The reticulospinal tract will be the ones functioning. Okay, so this is has a more severe prognosis. Okay. Now, what do we look for? Decrease in level of consciousness. Pwede yung eyes not anymore functioning, yung eye movements. Okay. Babinski sign because upper motor neuron has been compromised, and the patient does not actually have any motor function anymore. So, ito, affect yan, lumala na, bumaba na yung problem mo, kunyari yung hemorrhage. Okay? Ayan na, yung meron na siyang blood nandun at the level of this is at the level of the thalamus and here. So, affected na niya yung red nucleus. Okay? So, what happens, pwede siyang maging totally comatose. The brain can herniate, meaning that because may increased pressure, it can impinge upon the medulla to control respiration. The respiration is compromised already. Okay? So, basically, yon for cortical motor function. Okay pa kayo? Parang, pagod na tayo, no? Kaya ba? Okay pa kayo? Ha?
5 minutes.
5 minutes ano? Break? Sige, go! Break! Sige, sige. 4 to 5 minutes.